Hey everyone, thanks for listening to another episode of the Everyday Fi podcast, the show where we explore the lives and stories of everyday people in the financial independence community. I'm your host, Megan Combs, and today I'll be chatting with Yao, a remarkably adaptive young man who's pursuing financial independence through real estate investing. We chat a lot today about his money origin story and how he was super into coupons just like his mom, how being perceived as needy when he was younger caused him to spend more money than he probably should have as a young man, and how finding real estate actually helped him learn how to manage money better. We talk a lot today about Yao's money origin story, his real estate investing venture, and how he thinks that owning a property is actually more flexible than renting. Tune in to listen for more. Hey Yao, how are you doing? Welcome.
Doing
Thanks
well,
for
doing
joining
well.
me. Yeah, nice to see you again. So for the audience, Yao and I met at Camp Fi Mid-Atlantic in, when was that? May? Yeah. March? No, May.
Hey, it was bad.
It was May. What month is it? I'm really excited to chat with him because we didn't get to chat much while we were there. And you have a huge background in real estate that I think people are going to find really valuable. So I'm super excited about this. So why don't you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about yourself before we jump in?
For sure. And my name is Yao Thompson, originally from upstate New York, live in Richmond, Virginia. After my parents moved to Northern Virginia, I finished out middle school, high school in the Northern Virginia area, specifically around Reston, just outside of DC, probably about 2 hours or so. Honestly, didn't really know what I wanted to do when it came time to go to college. I got accepted to a few colleges, mainly for track. Didn't end up going, went to community college. And then eventually, after so much time of being just bored with life and not really having direction, I decided to go to VCU down in Richmond, which is where I am currently. I graduated with a criminal justice degree. For a bit, I thought about going to law school or doing something within the federal government, and eventually realized that they weren't necessarily interested in someone with a criminal justice degree. They want people with other experiences, and they'll teach you the criminal justice side. So I ended up getting a job at Capital One. From there, I was very bored with the work that I was doing. I was actually in a role where I was calling individuals to ask them if the charges on their card were fraud. And that situation did not align with what I felt I could be doing. I felt like I could definitely add potentially more value. Not that it's not valuable, but I felt like I could add more value. So I started to look at law school for a little bit. Ended up working at a law firm, and I remember like it was yesterday. There was a lawyer who was probably 7 or 8 years older than me, bald. He was divorced. Seemed very unhappy, and I decided that was not the direction I wanted my life to go. So after some conversations with a few friends, I decided to start applying to other jobs. And then I spoke with one specific friend in particular, Mr. Ishmael. I mean, he advised that I look into technology, specifically working at a help desk. But he kind of gave me this advice just based on our personal relationship. We'd known each other since before I went to college. He knew that I enjoy technology. I was eager to learn. I love asking questions and solving problems. And he was like, these are definitely attributes that would go very well in technology. So he kind of set me down that path. I ended up working in general help desk for 3 or 4 years with a few contracts, and then ended up getting my Security Plus and starting my security journey. And now, several years later, I work in vulnerability management, leading a program at an organization called Virginia Farm Bureau. It's a great company. I definitely love my job. Love security, honestly, in general. I've learned a lot throughout my journey in security, both as well as in life. Post college, I was not very financially responsible. Even, I guess, looking all the way back to high school, I was not financially responsible. Back then, it was a lot of buying shoes, buying clothes, buying junk food, eating out every weekend. Fast forward to college, there was less shoe buying, but still a lot more shoes than I needed in terms of spending, or the amount of money that I was spending on shoes. I could easily spend a couple $100 in a weekend on shoes and not think twice about it, which looking back, that money definitely could have been used in other ways. But at the same time, I definitely do appreciate those experiences and take those lessons now as I'm an adult. And I've, I guess, figured out different ways that I can still have fun without spending nearly as much money. And in fact, actually, within the last 2 years or so, I ended up or started to get into the world of real estate. And it's been helping me to learn a lot about how money works and how I can use it to my benefit and have more of, I guess, money that I have working for me and not spending as much time working for money. Not to say that it's passive, because it's definitely not passive, but it's a little passiver.
I'm so glad that you said that it's not passive because I really get a little bit annoyed when people are like, oh, real estate investing is passive. And I'm like, no, it's not. The only real passive investment is investing in the stock market because you literally do nothing and it grows. And so it's like, I just don't, it's just a misnomer that I'm glad you stated. So thank you. So, okay, what I love about the story you just told is how adaptive you are. It's amazing how you were like, okay, well, this didn't work, so let's pivot here. This didn't work, let's pivot here. Okay, I don't really want to be bald and divorced. Let's not be a lawyer, you know? And then I also like that you're giving yourself grace with the choices that you made with your spending, that, you know, you're not berating yourself for buying bunches of shoes, which I feel like a lot of us kind of do sometimes. One saying that I really like is regret is a pointless emotion. And I love that because I feel like every choice that we've made up to this point has created the person we are right now. And we wouldn't be who we are right now without our choices. And I feel like regretting those choices is pointless. And if you don't like who you are now, you move forward and then, like you said, learn from your choices before, but also appreciate, you know, what they were at the time. So I love that. And thanks for sharing. And I did have one question. You said that you were going to go to college for track, but then decided not to go. Can you elaborate on why you decided to go to community college instead?
Yeah, for sure. So when I was in my senior year, or I started my sophomore year of high school running track, I actually ran high hurdles, 110, 300, as well as long jump, triple jump, and then a few longer distances, and then maybe one 4x8 as punishment from my coach. Because sometimes you gotta, I guess, not do what your coach says, and he has to punish you. But yeah, so I when I was applying to different schools, I didn't apply to nearly as many as some of my friends. I remember applying to Lynchburg College and a few others, and I ended up getting accepted into Lynchburg, and they were going to give me, I guess, a small academic scholarship, and then also small piece for track that would be, I guess, marked as academic. But even still, at the time, I think it was like something like 15,000 a semester, which seemed very expensive. And I didn't really necessarily have a concept of how much that actually was in comparison to other schools at the time, but it just seemed like something that I wasn't necessarily as gung ho about moving forward with. So I decided to just play it cool, go to community college. I remember hearing that a lot of the Virginia school system or college community college systems have arrangements with some of the state schools to where if you take a certain amount of classes or certain classes within the community college level, those will actually transfer over into other schools. So it seemed like almost like a no-brainer. The biggest caveat was the fact that you have to make sure that you know what you want to do, and two, you have to, I guess, follow through. And it's very easy when you're in community college, especially if you're still back home, at least for me, to just continue life as if I'm not currently in school and not necessarily have any motivation to change anything.
Yeah, that makes sense. And it's impressive to me that you were taking cost into consideration at such a young age. A lot of the times when people go to college, me, we don't look at the price tag. And a lot of the advice we got were just take out student loans. It's fine. So what made you think about costs? Like why did you have that on your mind when you were looking at schools?
I feel like growing up, my family We definitely were not necessarily what some would consider poor, but we were far from well off. If I were to say anything, I would say we were probably middle class, but kind of looking back and comparing, that may not have been the case. So I graduated in 2006, and I think around that time, financial markets or what have you were not necessarily doing as well. Growing up, my father worked in the upstate New York area, and we as a family ended up migrating to Northern Virginia because the tech market where he was working in upstate New York dissipated once GE moved out of that area. So I remember moving from a house to an apartment, and so I was like, hey, like, I don't necessarily think that we have all the money in the world because a bunch of my friends have houses. So didn't really have that much insight into like the actual finances of the household, but it just didn't seem like something that was. It seemed like something that I had to pay attention to. I would say that I kind of made that decision based off the fact, for one, it didn't seem like our finances in our household were at a point where I could completely disregard the cost. But then in addition, the cost that was associated with that college, with it not being some college that's very well known, just didn't make sense to me. So I just kind of pumped the brakes and decided that, hey, I'll wait until there's other options available and I can make a more informed decision.
Yeah, thank you for elaborating. It's still impressive to me because when I was 18, I was like, let's go to school and just party and who cares, money. But it sounds like you were a very wise 18-year-old. That actually leads me to, I mean, I'm glad we started down the path of, your family's finances because I really love digging into people's, money stories, their origin money stories, as it were. And I wonder, what is one of your earliest money memories?
So I would feel like the earliest money memory that I can remember is moving to Northern Virginia. So we were in upstate New York. I just remember one day we started to pack up the house, pack up the U-Haul, drove up to Northern Virginia from upstate New York, and all of a sudden I have a brand new set of people that I'm supposed to get to know, and they're supposed to become my friends. And it was like, I don't know what just happened, but I just left all my friends and you want me to make new ones? Like, this doesn't seem fair. And related to that, there was actually a specific day in the sixth grade when I was in class, and a teacher, I think her name was Miss Wood, she was like 6'3" or something. Like, she was super tall. And she actually walked up to me and she was like, hey, like, I have some old clothes that I no longer wear and no longer need. If you need any, like, I'd be happy to give them to you. And I kind of just looked at her and I was like, what? What are you talking about? Because for all accounts and purposes, like, I didn't think that I was in a place where I was in need of clothes from anyone, much less someone so tall and not of the same gender, I guess. So yeah, that definitely kind of took me aback, and that would probably be the first time I was just like, I don't know what's going on, and kind of going from that, like, I just remember like middle school, high school, was just like just spending, blowing money on clothes and shoes. And it might have been related to that if I look back and think hard enough.
So, okay, so you think it's related to this teacher thinking that you needed clothes and you kind of thinking like, what is she seeing that I'm not seeing here? Is
Yeah.
that why you think you blew money on clothes and shoes?
Yeah. Almost like a overcompensation, maybe, in a way. So like this one person is potentially saying that I am in need of clothes. So let me just go out and spend all my money on clothes and shoes I don't need. But I mean, at the same time, though, I feel like the area that I was in, there was a big emphasis on how you look and what you're wearing. So that also definitely played a role in, I guess, my young, very moldable mind.
Yeah, I think that's a common trope in a lot of areas is, I was actually just sidebar, but I was talking to my boyfriend the other day about how inexplicable bullies are, because I remember being bullied for the kind of clothes that I was wearing in like fifth grade. So 10 years old, like who freaking cares? You're 10. And so I was like, okay, cool. I'm going to go out and get the cool jeans. And so I got the cool jeans, and this was like 1997. And so the cool jeans were like some sort of, I don't know, they were probably Jinkos or something. I'm not even kidding. But I remember wearing them, and then they made fun of me for trying to be cool. So it was like, okay, I can't win here. so
Nope.
so I get it. It's this, you know, deep seated need in all of us to be accepted and seen as worthy. And for some reason, we tie a lot of that to outward appearance, what we own, what we drive, where we live, the amount of money in our bank account. There's that saying like net worth is not self worth, but it feels like it is. So I totally get what you're saying. And it makes me wonder, like, how your parents talked about money in your household. Do you remember them ever discussing money topics, and what kind of, way did they talk between each other, between the rest of the family, and how much were you aware of the money situation as, you know, young child, middle school, high school?
They didn't really ever specifically talk about money. I know I've heard that some people's parents will kind of go over how money works and how you use it to pay for different things and how to use it to save. My parents, it seemed like we had things. I'm sure we had bills and they were somehow paid, but they never really kind of went over any of that. I do know that there were definitely several instances in which it was the statement was, "Oh, we can't afford that, or we can't get that, or you can take that out of the basket. We're only getting what we came here for." So I feel like there was kind of that notion of we can get what we can get, and anything outside of that bubble is off the table. And my mom, I definitely appreciate my mom a lot because one thing that she instilled in me without really knowing it is the thought of saving money. So we used to, from time to time, go to this place called Frugal Fanny's out in Northern Virginia. It was basically just like almost like a flea market, but it was indoors, and it was cool. Like they had some stylish things that you had to kind of hunt for, but the pricing was, I just remember it being like just super inexpensive. Like it didn't make sense how inexpensive it was. But I remember like going out to those things and I'll be like, the first few times I was just like, I don't want to be here. Then I was like, oh, there's something cool here. And we find something cool. We also sometimes would go to, oh, I remember we would go to the grocery store and my mom would always have coupons. She would always have coupons. And then even sometimes I remember like either someone wouldn't accept the coupon or they'd give some excuse and she'd be like, nope, these are the rules. And she'd pull out the rules and show it to them and like read it to them. And she'd be like, I have this coupon. I'm going to use this coupon. And so it definitely helped to kind of concrete the fact that like, hey, you know the rules. Like you can make sure that you're paying the price that you want to pay, assuming you try and potentially even fight for it.
Yeah, that makes sense. How do you think that kind of idea permeated through your adulthood, do you think?
Well, pre going to I guess VCU, extreme couponing was like all the rage. And there was a show on I can't remember which channel, but there was a show that I used to watch and be like, yo, this was my mom back in the day. And I kind of got the kick and then yeah, I was couponing like nobody's business. I had a binder. I would order some additional coupons. Like it's a fun time. I remember coming to college and I had something like 45 small Tide bottles, a bunch of nuts in drinks. I had Capri Suns for days, Dial soap. Like I just had like this mini BJ's warehouse in my college dorm because of the fact that I had coupons so much. And I was just like, I mean, I have like thousands of dollars worth of stuff, but I only paid a couple $100 for it. So, and then I stopped.
Well, why did you stop?
I don't know. Like I feel like after a certain point, it got hard and kind of frustrating. So like a big piece for my couponing that made it so easy for me was there was a combination of the ability to buy certain specific coupons on like eBay, and then there was also a community center that was near where my parents lived that they would just have like stacks of newspapers, and those stacks of newspapers would have coupons in it. So I would go to the community center, get the stack of newspapers, spend like a day cutting my coupons, sorting them in my binder, and then planning my shopping trip. And it was like I'm spending hours upon hours, kind of like figuring out this way to stack the coupons, like because there was you're the manufacturer coupon, and then you have Catalina coupons, which come out of the Catalina printer at the register, and then you also have some stores have their own coupons as well, and so sometimes you can stack certain coupons to get additional savings, and then they'll have a coupon day where like you'll get a double coupon value, and it was a lot. It was a lot, but I definitely enjoyed it while I was doing it, and sometimes I still wish I did it, but I know even now. I don't do it nearly as often, but I did product testing for Nike. That was a nice little hack that I figured out. Some people got free like shoes that they got to test. I never was that fortunate. I only got clothes. But then there's also secret shopping that I found out about. I did that for a little bit, which was always fun to get like basically a free oil change just for like reporting on how clean the bathroom was and how they actually followed a process for the oil change. There was a T-Mobile shop where you go in and say you're going to open up a line of service, and based on how the process goes, they pay you a certain amount. Or it's banking shops where you go to a bank, open an account, and then assuming that or they follow whatever process they have, and then you get paid out just for doing the thing. So there's so many different ways to save money and make money that it's kind of unbelievable.
Yeah, it really is. I think I've heard of Secret Shopper. I think I might have signed up for that when it was around. I don't know if it's around anymore. I'm going to look it up. And if it is around, I'll link it in the show notes, of course, everybody. But I'm pretty sure I signed up, but I don't think I ever dove into it. And I don't remember why. I couldn't tell you, but I have so many side hustles. I don't have as many right now because I would prefer to dedicate time to the podcast. So I don't have as many anymore, but like there's one that's called Sniff Spot where I rent out my backyard to dog owners who, have dogs who might need like a private dog park rather than a public one, and or are living in like not hotels, sorry, are living in apartments and don't have yards, or they maybe have a yard but don't have a fenced in yard. And so I just let them come and hang in my fenced in yard and with their dog and get like, I think I make like between 50 and $80 a month. It's not a lot, but I literally do nothing. It's super passive. But there's so many things out there. But back to the coupons, like it's interesting that you were very gung ho about it. And then once you realized how much time it was taking and how complicated it got, which I feel like is something that the stores kind of realized people were starting to hack the system and like get a lot of stuff for way cheaper than they should. And so they made it more complicated, right?
Yep.
I really like that you realized that like, okay, this is no longer worth my time. And so I'm going to switch, my valuable time to something that is going to give me more income rather than just saving a couple dollars here and there. So I really like that. I think that's something that Ramit Sethi calls like $3 questions versus $30,000 questions. But I will challenge him and say that the $3 questions can add up sometimes because if you shop at Target enough and you only buy $20 worth of Target, but you're doing that every single day for a month, that adds up. So it's also one of those things where you're like, okay, well, you got to balance it. But yeah, I like that you took that initiative to realize like, I'm going to switch my efforts somewhere else. So, how would you say your upbringing shaped your financial philosophies as an adult? I know you mentioned that when your mother was using a coupon and somebody wouldn't take it, she'd be like, nope, these are the rules. And you said that really kind of, had an impact on you because you realized if you follow the rules, you can pay what you should be paying for something So that stuck out to me. And so it makes me wonder, like, what other philosophies did you learn from growing up the way you did with money?
Yeah, I would say some of the bigger ones are kind of knowing what the rules allow from a, I guess from a financial perspective, and just making sure to be like, hey, like if this rule exists, I can follow it, and I'm not doing anything wrong. So like the one of the bigger things that kind of sticks out related to that is returns. I know some I know there were definitely times in which my mother had the right and ability to return something, and someone potentially tried to like, oh, we're not going to accept that back. And there was no necessarily justification as to why they weren't going to accept it back. They just, for whatever reason, felt that they had the right to deny that return. And it was just as simple as asking for a manager, and all of a sudden, she's like, okay, yeah, we'll take it back. And so, like, even like growing into adulthood, it's kind of realizing that sometimes you have to stick up for yourself financially because other people won't necessarily. So, like, I guess to kind of put it back in the return perspective, I might have the ability to return something, and someone might feel as though they don't want to accept the return, even though they're not necessarily the store manager, the owner of the company, what have you. I mean, it's up to me to say, no, why aren't you accepting this return? Or can I speak to a manager? Let me move this up the chain versus just taking the no is no and just walking away. Because if my return is legitimate, that could be money that I'm essentially wasting by not returning the item. It was just overall, I would say the biggest thing that I got from my mom and dad in terms of finances is to be aware of your finances, but then also, in a sense, it was kind of limiting. So some people can afford this, some people can afford that, versus like, how can I afford what I want? What different levers can I pull on to justify something?
Gotcha. So you said that your parents saw what they could afford as basically black and white, that if they couldn't afford something, they couldn't afford it. There was no lever to pull. That was just it. Whereas now, as an adult, you're like, okay, instead of I can't afford this, it's how can I afford this? Is that correct?
Precisely.
Awesome. That's amazing. That's a really great way to look at something. Do you have an example of how you've kind of implemented that in your life?
Yeah, so I guess the first thing that kind of comes to mind is a house. I bought my first house at the ripe age of 34, 33 going to 34. And for the longest amount of time, I was like, I can't afford a house. There's no way. But I also knew nothing about what a house cost. And so, first, learning about, I guess, the different costs associated with buying a house, the fact that it costs 300,000. I'm not paying 300,000. I'm paying my down payment, paying closing costs, maybe a few fees here and there, and then the mortgage, which is a monthly cost, which is essentially rent. So, and then figuring out the fact that by me paying the mortgage, I'm gaining equity and other benefits that I don't necessarily get with rent. So then it just became a matter of figuring out how can I afford the down payment and closing costs? What can I do to make sure that's affordable? That way I can get into a house, because with the assumption that I can figure out everything else once I have the house, for my situation, it'll save me money. It'll put me in a position that in a sense kind of allows more flexibility. But I definitely see the ability to be flexible while not having a mortgage and just renting. But I definitely felt like after the fact, not necessarily before the fact, after the fact, that I was squandering money every month and not necessarily seeing anything from it. Whereas now I do see a benefit from it.
Yeah, that makes sense. You mentioned that owning a home is more flexible than renting. Can you tell me why you think that and how you found it to be more flexible?
For sure. So, and some of these thoughts, I guess, are more new since owning a home. But to an extent, everyone who's renting is paying a mortgage. It's just not their own. As a landlord, like the whole goal is to make profit and to have someone else pay your mortgage. And so when I transitioned from a renter to a homeowner, I was responsible for the mortgage, the taxes, insurance, all those things. But I'm getting the benefit of every month I'm paying down principal and interest. And when I pay down principal, I get equity. And that equity can then be turned potentially into cash down the line. If I decide to pull it out, I can potentially, because I have an ownership stake in the property, I have the ability to rent out the property, rent out portion of the property, different things to subsidize how much I'm paying. And you can, to an extent, do that as well when you're renting, but the terms of your lease might negate that ability. So when before I was a homeowner and I just rented, I remember spending, I think at the lowest amount, my rent was like $700 a month. At the highest amount, it was $1,600 a month. I remember one time I actually looked at the lease and it was like, your total rent that you're going to pay this year is going to be $16,000. And I was like, I'm going to spend $16,000 on what? How is that going to happen? And to think that like that money could have been down payment on a house, it could have been equity that like, and the concept of equity didn't make sense to me until more recently. But I would say that the biggest thing is just like, I'm never going to see that money that I put in rent ever again. Like it's gone. I get no benefit from it. And not to say that owning a house, it doesn't have its costs, but my mortgage is cheaper than a lot of the rents that I've paid. And even though it does have the ability to raise because of taxes, it's still a lot cheaper. Even just thinking about the fact that the first house that I got was not in the best area of town. It wasn't the worst area of town, but it wasn't necessarily the best area of town. And my mortgage was $1,200. I might have had about 10,000 between closing costs but within, I think it was like 2 months of living there, I was Airbnb-ing two of the three rooms that were in the house. And I was out of pocket probably paying at that time $200 or $300 a month between the profits I was making from like Airbnb each of the rooms to how much I was actually putting out between utilities and my mortgage. And then within a few months after that, I was actually renting out those rooms, and I was making $40 a month. So I had zero living cost, and I'm making $40 a month. And when you don't have like, I guess, a housing expense, you could save a lot of money. And that is when like the light bulb clicked, and I was like, oh, I think I like this. So yeah, just regret, as you said, is a thing that should not exist. And there's also another statement that I've heard a lot is there are no losses, there are only lessons. And I definitely see that lesson as like, hey, it happened in the past. I can't be regretful from it. I just learned a lesson that I can take on into the future.
I love that. That's a great one. I'm going to put that in my repertoire. Are you ready to take control of your financial future? Do you want to learn how to set powerful goals and invest wisely? Have you been yearning to quit your 9 to 5? Then my workbook, Your Journey to Freedom, is for you. This workbook is your roadmap to financial success. Whether you're a seasoned investor or just starting out, it's designed to help you define your goals, create a plan, and take action towards building wealth. Inside, you'll find practical exercises and tools that will help you identify your short, medium, and long-term financial goals, develop a personalized investment strategy tailored to these goals and your risk tolerance, track your progress and stay accountable to your financial objectives, Plus, there's bonus content like a quiz to test what you learn and a budget worksheet. With easy to follow instructions and insightful prompts, this workbook will empower you to make confident decisions and stay focused on your financial journey. Don't let another day go by without taking charge of your financial life. Invest in yourself and your future with the Your Journey to Freedom workbook. Order now and start turning your dreams into reality. Visit my website at everyday-fi.com/guides to get your copy today and start your journey to financial freedom. It's funny because there's always that debate, rent versus buy. But I think our community specifically looks at owning very differently than the rest of the country, right? Because we know we know what house hacking is. And we've done it before. I mean, when I bought my house, I rented out, it was a 2-bedroom, 1 bath, and I rented out the other room for $800 a month. And now, granted, it didn't cover as much as yours did, but it definitely covered a big chunk of my mortgage. And to rent the same house that I owned would have been so much more expensive. And that money went straight into all of the, upkeep and repairs and maintenance that I wanted to do on the house. And so it's like, and then I'm building equity, like you said. And I already have a big chunk of equity because I put 20% down. And so, like, with house hacking, you're putting that money back in your pocket, and you can get to a point, like you said, where like you have zero housing expenses. And so there's really no competition because you can't really house hack as a renter. I mean, you can try, but a lot of landlords are going to try and get as much rent as they can with as many like people in the unit. If they know a second person is in the unit, they might even raise the rent. I've seen it happen. And you have very little control over that situation because you're beholden to a landlord. Whereas if you're your own landlord, you're not beholden to anybody but yourself. And so, yeah, I think it's something that when you think a little bit more creatively, you can see that buying a property can actually be very beneficial towards your bottom line if you are willing to have the roommate, have the Airbnb, whatever, and or do the house hack or whatever you want to do. And I think, yeah, so that debate in our community is a little bit different. And this leads me to, I know that you have a real estate investing business, and I'd love to hear more about that. Why did you get started in that? And how many doors do you have? Like, just tell us about your journey there.
In terms of the number of doors, probably 24 and a half. I definitely am fortunate that so I live in Richmond, Virginia, and there's a bit, or what seems to be a very big real estate investing market where people are very collaborative and they share information and they're very willing to help. So I recall it was 2021. I was actually fortunate enough to just go on a beach week trip with some friends, and one of the friends of a friend that was there, a gentleman by the name of Randy, he had just gotten laid off from Capital One, and he was like, "Yeah, it sucks, but I mean, I've been kind of thinking about doing this whole rental thing even more, so I don't really think I'm too upset." And that whole mindset was a little off-putting to me, but it also at the same time was very intriguing. So if we were down in Myrtle Beach for 7 days, 6 of those days I was talking to Randy and trying to pick his brain and figure out why he was not concerned that he just lost his job. And he told me, yeah, like, I've been buying one house a year for the last 15 years, and now I got 15 rentals, and I just would buy a house and rent out all the rooms and live in one room, and my roommates would pay my mortgage, and then after the year, I would take that money and put a down payment on another house, and I just rinse and repeat. And I was just like, "Wait, how much you can do that? Huh? What are you talking about? Like, that's a thing?" And he just said it in a way that just made sense and didn't seem like so impossibly hard that I couldn't do it. So I started to actually like reach out to realtors and like actually pay them mind. Before I used to go to open houses and just eat the free food and like leave and put like maybe put down like a fake name or something. But now it's just like, oh, well, this is okay. I understand it now. Let me try to do more of this. But yeah, so like I bought that first house, Airbnb the rooms while I was trying to figure out how to do the whole rental thing. I was listening to somehow I had heard of Bigger Pockets, which is a podcast and community for other people within real estate or people that even want to learn real estate. You might not necessarily already be in it, you might have aspirations of learning more and getting more involved, and it's definitely a great community for that. I work in technology, so like consuming information is nothing new to me. So I went down all the rabbit holes. I would binge YouTube, I would binge podcasts, I would read a few books here and there, I would talk to people, ask them questions. And I remember initially starting out, I would print out leasing applications that I found online and I would meet people at the coffee shop and interview them to be like potential roommates. And it was not fun driving all over the city and handing out these paper applications and then having to go through it. And I remember hearing about on one of the podcasts some property management software, and I was like, oh, that sounds expensive. So I just brushed it off. And then I got frustrated, and I was like, you know what? Let me look into this thing. And I found out how much it was. And I was like, oh, I can afford that. Like, it's like $20 a year. Like, I can afford that. And it just made life so much easier. So, started there and then met and started to date my now wife. And eventually I got to the point where I was at a year of being within my house. And again, I like to go down rabbit holes and learn a bunch of information. I learned that with owner occupant mortgages that are endorsed by, I guess, two bodies, Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, there's basically a clause in the mortgage statement that basically states that if it's an owner occupied loan, primary residence loan, you have to live in the property for at least a year. So some of the adage is if you live in the property for a year and a day, you've met all the requirements and you can do what you please. So once I met that year and a day, I moved out, moved in with my wife, and I was like, this is officially a rental. And I started to advertise it and look for people to rent. I screened a bunch of people and was eventually able to find someone that loved the property and they seemed like a good fit. I did my background check, eviction history check, criminal check, income verification, called their prior employers, did all the things that I read on all the blogs to do, and passed all my tests. And I was like, you know what, I'm ready to move forward. And that tenant has been there for going on 2 years now. We actually just did a renewal, so that was fun. And then eventually, my wife and I, or my now wife and I, bought a house, and we decided to rent her house out. So I helped her to go through that process and figure out what would work for her. We figured out the appropriate rental rates, and yeah, it's been great. I work in technology, so contrary to popular belief, I feel like not necessarily everyone, but a lot of people, including myself in technology, are lazy. So I always try to find ways around doing as much. Like I'll do the work, and the work will get done. But if I don't necessarily have to do as much of it to get to that level, then that sounds good to me. So through some of the relationships that I had and some of the people that I met, one thing that always was kind of repeated was who, not how, as well as making sure to be mindful of your time, since that's your most important resource or asset. And so I was able to find out about different resources that are available to assist me in still getting to the same goal of being able to be a landlord who's on top of the different issues and on top of being able to communicate with tenants, but at the same time not necessarily put it in a way that's going to draw all of my time away or become a big frustration and be a means of, I guess, stress. So I was actually introduced to the concept of a virtual assistant. And so I currently leverage or have a virtual assistant that helps me in my business. And so I have some processes that I've worked on building out to screen tenants or to screen applicants to then help tenants to actually be placed, as well as just general communication. If a tenant has a maintenance issue, I'm the kind of landlord that if I had an issue, I would want it addressed sooner rather than later. And I want to be able to provide that same experience for my tenants. I don't believe in slumlords, and I don't want to be classified as one. So if someone can assist me with that, I feel like that's a win for everyone. So having some processes has definitely helped that, being that those processes are documented and those processes can be followed, which allows my second set of hands, ears, and the like to be able to assist in making sure that when I'm not available, my tenants are still able to be assisted.
Yeah, that's really smart because you don't want to be the bottleneck of your own company, right? And I mean, I'm the only one doing the podcast right now, but I already know this just as somebody who also works in tech and works in product management. You never want to be the person who has all the knowledge. You always want to document. They like drill that into your head. And of course, it's like the most boring crap in the world, but still, it's super important. And even for the podcast, like it's only me, but I still put processes in place that when eventually I get my virtual assistant, which taught me about before we hit record, thank you, that they will be able to just plug and play. Like I might go over it once with them, but then they'll just be able to plug into what I've already got. I've got an Asana board and like, a spreadsheet and things like that that they can just plug in and see my process and potentially tweak it to what works for them, of course. But there it is. And yeah, I love that. I also really I agree with people in the tech field. The best developers are always the laziest because they will develop something so efficiently that they can do their job even faster because they put all these things into place because they don't want to do like the manual repetitive tasks. So they'll automate that. And it's funny because lazy is seen as such a derogatory term, but it's actually seen as like a really great term in the tech world. So yeah, I love that. So I have so many questions because there's so much in what you just said. So I'm going to go back in time a little bit to back when you were intrigued by your friend who got laid off at Capital One and then was okay with it because he had some of these investment properties. What intrigued you so much about him being okay being laid off and not necessarily looking for another job? Like, what about that intrigued you?
Yeah. So I would say honestly, just the general. I got laid off, and I'm not frantically searching for another job. I've gotten fired once, I think, in my life, and I think I was in high school, probably around the time, so it probably wasn't as big of a deal. But it, I remember the feeling of it, like, oh, I feel like a failure. And then, in fact, actually, like more recently, within the last year and a half, 2 years, I was laid off, and I was just like, oh my god, I'm the biggest failure in life. But for all I've known, anytime someone doesn't have a job, they're looked at as a failure. They're looked at as someone who can't do something, can't make it in life. And so, for all I knew up until that point was, if you're not uber wealthy, you work every day, Monday through Friday, and sometimes more. So to meet someone who they were in a comfortable place in their life where they felt as if the money they were getting from their employer was helpful, but not necessarily necessary, was this moment of confusion. And I don't like to be confused. So I just had to understand it. And when I want to understand something, I generally ask questions. And I ask a lot of questions. And I just kept asking questions. And I'm sure some of them were annoying, but like I was curious. I wanted to know. I wanted to figure it out. I wanted to figure out how I could potentially get to a place like that because there've definitely been plenty of employers that I've had where I was like, hey, if you weren't paying me a paycheck every 2 weeks, I would not be here. And to be at a point where you can just live and enjoy your life, I think that's amazing. Like I can't tell you how many times I go on vacation, I have some amazing trip, and I'm just like, I have to go to work in a few days or a few weeks or a few hours. Well, that was fun. I guess I'll have to wait till the next one. So
Yeah, that makes sense. It sounds like this is what brought you to the financial independence movement, which is, one of my questions is how you first learned about it, why you were drawn to it. So it's a good culmination. And I can see why, you know, I feel like society just builds you up to if you're not being productive, then you are not a helpful member of society and you should be shot. But it's like, well, if you have independent wealth and you don't need this employer and you see that and you have never seen that before and you're like, what? I could see how you would see this person like you're living completely differently than I've been taught my entire life. What? So I completely understand the asking all of the questions. I probably would have done the same. Another question I had, which is just a technical question, what was the PM software that you bought? Because there might be some people who are interested in potentially getting that for themselves.
so the initial one that I signed up for was called Turbo Tenant, and then I found a program called Inago, INNAGO. They're actually completely free for landlords, which is a game changer. And normally, when I hear the word free associated with software, I think crap because normally free software is crap. But
Or free means, if you're not buying something, then you are the product, right?
yeah,
They're using your
very,
data for
very,
something.
very much a Google mentality.
Yeah.
But no, so like I use Inago now, and it's amazing. They're constantly adding improvements and adding updates and adding features, and it's amazing. And the reason, I guess, working in tech, it I guess helps with my understanding as to how it can be such low overhead for them. So the way that I've, I guess, made sense of this is most property management software that exists is the byproduct of a property management company making software to either sell as an additional income stream or potentially they have their own software that they use internally and then they put it out there because hey, additional income stream or they just want to do something else, whatever. In this particular case, it was actually a few different private landlords that worked in tech and they were like, hey, don't need we don't have the overhead of having this property management business. So we can build this in the cloud. We can build it sustainably. We can have it determine, I guess, technology called scaling. So basically, it can meet the needs as those needs grow. And so they don't have as much overhead as a lot of the property management companies. Because they're thinking about it from a tech perspective, they also make money in a variety of other ways. So they buy applications in bulk and charge retail to the applicant. In addition to that, they also make a spread on fees that are charged for payment processing. But benefit to the landlord, free software. I mean, it's definitely not crap. So I just had so in our current house, my wife and I, we have a midterm rental. So it's furnished finder, essentially someone who's coming to stay for at least 30 days. In this case, it was, I believe, about 3 months. And so I did all the background criminal eviction history check and income verification, or all those through the Inago software. They do income verification using this service called Plaid, which essentially just connects to your bank account. And then in this particular case, it will find direct deposits and say, hey, this is direct deposit from a company. This income is verified. They recently added the ability to return security deposits through the application. typically you have to receive your security deposit by whatever means you receive it. And then after you perform your necessary checks to ensure that there's no excessive damage, you return it, at least in Virginia, you return it by check via mail within 45 days. So the ability to simply click a button and have that automatically direct deposited or ACH'd into the other person's account is lovely because I'm lazy and I don't have the patience to deal with stamps in the post office.
Who does? Yeah, I agree with that. It's funny, side note, I work for a software company that our customer is property management companies. So we're building like a lease signing tool for them. And I'm actually working with AI to try and generate lease summaries for the renters because a lot of times renters don't read their lease fully. And so we're trying to use AI to help generate a more casual tone of voice for their lease. And then they can look up different, parameters of their lease that they want to. So it's funny that you're talking about all this because I'm like, yeah, this is kind of what I do every day. I want to dive in more though with your financial independence journey. So like we've touched on it, we've skirted around it. But I want to dive in deeper about why you want to reach financial independence. And I know you're mainly using real estate to do that, but what draws you to this movement specifically, and why do you want to reach financial freedom?
For me, looking back, I guess in my childhood, there was a lot of time with my parents where they were spending that time working, working to pay bills, working to pay for, I guess, training and different activities for myself and my brother. I definitely have memories with them, but I can also have a lot of memories where I just remember them. Oh, they're at work doing this thing. I come home and I go out to play with friends. I come back and they're just now getting in at like 7 p.m. or what have you. Me and my wife definitely want kids, and I would prefer to spend as much time with them and my wife and my family as possible. I think the first time I heard about Fi was actually through listening to Bigger Pockets. There's I guess, a sister podcast, if you will, called Bigger Pockets Money, where they talk more about the financial side and Fi, as well as different ways that you can better spend money, better be aware of your real estate business or what you're doing in real estate. Because just because you have doors or properties or what have you doesn't necessarily mean you're making money. Like there are plenty of instances of people having 100 doors and losing money every single month. And they might have what people call a W 2 job or just a normal job, and that might be supporting their doors. So being aware of your finances is always a good thing, but then even potentially being able to speed up my time to retirement to where I can actually enjoy my life resonate with me. I don't want to. I don't want to wait till I'm 63 years old to start taking trips because I'm not sure that when I'm 63 years old I'll want to take trips. I'm not sure I'll be able to take trips. So I'd much rather do that sooner rather than later, personally.
Yeah, that makes sense. And to anybody who's 63 out there, we know that you're still young. It's fine. No, my mom just turned 66, so I have to throw that in for her. So I guess you alluded to this a little bit, but I want to know more about what reaching financial independence looks like for you. So, like, what does the other side, once you don't have to work a traditional job anymore, what does that look like? What are you doing on a typical Tuesday, for instance?
I can tell you what, I'm definitely not just sleeping in bed, watching TV, or doing nothing. I love to learn. I love to do things, pick up new things. Uh, if you talk to my wife, I probably have way too many hobbies and things that I do. Even just last night, so today's a Friday, it's like 6 p.m., but last night I was up until 1 a.m. watching like educational content on YouTube. Uh, I enjoy learning and growing and doing stuff. I also enjoy traveling. So like I didn't start traveling internationally until I think it was like 2016. I was probably like 26 or 27 at the time, and I fell in love. And I've been to so many countries and enjoyed so much in terms of activities. I dance salsa and bachata occasionally. I've been dancing, I guess, since probably going on 2009. Yeah, a long time now, and I still enjoy going out and having fun. So like, I just honestly, us being able to enjoy our life and do what we want to do when we want to do it, and not having to sacrifice because we have to go to work in order to pay our bills. To me, is a dream. Having the ability to make the conscious decision of this is what I want to do versus this is what I need to do based on decisions that I could have made differently.
Yeah, that absolutely makes so much sense. And I think is very similar to why a lot of people are on this path. And it's kind of what brings us together as a community is we have the same thought of having, I mean, that's why we call it financial freedom, financial independence. It's that freedom to live a life without being beholden to what I say, making somebody else's dreams come true. So I myself, like, I like my job a lot. And I know there's people who are at my job listening to this podcast right now because they know about it and they know that I like it. And it's something that I'm definitely going to enjoy for several years to come because I'm definitely not close to financial independence. But it doesn't mean that I want to spend 40 to 50 hours a week doing this all the time. There are things in my life that are more important and definitely things in the future, like me too. When I have kids, I want to spend more time with them. And that's going to be the number one most important thing to me. Not a job comes probably ranks like 5 or 6 on my list of most important things. And it's funny because a lot of people rank it like 1 or 2. And I've never identified with that ever. I've never ranked a job that high, which might be why, like, I don't know. I don't stay at places very long, although this current job is pretty freaking great. So I probably will stay there for a while. But anyway, I digress. I'm really glad that you shared that with us. And I think, like I said, a lot of the community members are probably on the same page as you. So yeah, it's great that you're here. And I love that. So I want to talk a little bit about any current wins or struggles that you're having right now that you can share with the community. Maybe we can learn from some situations that you're going with or going through right now. And let's start with any current struggles and then we'll end on the wins. We'll end on the high note.
In terms of struggles, math is hard. Tracking all the things is hard. It's like, oh, like you make a healthy or what people consider a healthy amount, like you should be good. This should be easy for you. Like, no, there's bills, there's things that come up. It seems like there's a wedding like every 2 months. Uh, there's so much unaccounted for, and it's so easy to get stuck in what I would consider like subscription jail, where you just have 1,000 subscriptions. You no longer have cable, fortunately, but you have Netflix, YouTube, Spotify, Apple, Google, and 25 other things. And you're like, where's all my money going? And it's really hard to pay attention to all those things. The one thing that I'm thankful for, especially within the FI community, is there's so many different apps that people recommend that help to kind of get a hold of your budget. So my wife and I currently use Rocket Money. I know I've heard about Monarch and a few other ones. And there used to be Mint, but that's no longer a thing. But with the one with Rocket Money, it allows us to kind of see what all of our different accounts are doing at a high level, but then also dig down into the specific amounts being spent with which specific vendors. And then if we notice a subscription, which there are a few that kind of caught us by surprise, we have the ability to request that it be canceled directly from the app, which is super helpful. So that's definitely helped a lot within my local Choose Fi community. I've been able to make some friendships, and one of those friends, shout out to Adam, told me about this program called Projection Lab. It allows you to input all of your investments as well as all of your different accounts that you have savings in, checking, what have you. Maybe you own some assets, real estate, what have you, and it will project out so many years to say this is what, based on the rate of inflation, taxes, and all these other variables, what your net worth and as well as cash flows will be at some projected time. It will actually run through this like simulation to basically say like, given certain assumptions within certain time periods, how will that affect your money? So like if I had the same amount of money I have now, but I back in 2008 during that financial crisis, how would my assets be affected and how would that affect my overall projection? I think it's like a Monte Carlo simulation, if I recall correctly. But yeah, it's really helpful just in making sure that I can be more confident in what I have and what I need to get to, or what we need to get to our goals, and feel more comfortable about, hey, we feel as though we're safe versus these are just numbers. We have $500 in savings and $100 in this investment. I think we should be good, but we don't know. I'm not an Excel wizard, not a gift I was given. And so having, I guess, a program that kind of do that for me, but then also go with a variety of different assumptions, variables, and then kind of project that out is definitely helpful in making me feel more confident and saying like, you know what, this is the plan that we have to change these things, pull these other different levers, and this will adjust our outcome and feel confident about that.
Yeah, math is hard. I know there's a lot of spreadsheet nerds in the audience, but I will say that I use spreadsheets to basically as just like a ledger. And I know the sum formula and the average formula, and that's it. Like I'm not
Yeah.
doing much else. Or I'm using it to track like my projects. I'm not using it for math whatsoever. It's almost like a database. So I understand. And yeah, I'm definitely going to look up Projection Lab. That looks really cool. And I wish I could tell you guys how to run Monte Carlo simulations on your own. I think you have to be like a certified financial planner to have access to those things. But if anybody, knows of like a free or public, or even if it costs money, like public facing Monte Carlo simulation software, please leave it in the comments on this episode website page, which will be linked in the show notes because we want to know. We all want to know what that is because, yeah, not all of us are spreadsheet geeks. So, okay. So, yeah, what are your current wins right now?
Oh my gosh. In terms of wins, I would say I'm getting more comfortable with delegation. And delegation gives me back time. Documenting processes has definitely helped in this because it allows me to offload some more work onto the virtual assistant that's helping me. So my virtual assistant obviously helps with my rental business, but she's also helped with even just some other like kind of day-to-day tasks. So my wife and I just recently went on a honeymoon, and it was in the or not the Philippines, it was in Thailand, and it was amazing. It was truly amazing. The food was amazing, the people were amazing. Like I didn't want to come back at all. I remember realizing that we had 3 more days here, and I was just like, find a way to say I'm sick and maybe get a few extra days or something. But I'm not sure how that's going to actually roll over since it's like another 24-hour trip to get back. But so she actually went through the process of helping us figure out some of our lodging. So like I set some parameters. Well, my wife gave me the specific parameters that I had to work in, and I remember hearing from someone that some virtual assistants can also like plan travel. So no, like I'll just ask if she's okay doing this. And she responded like, "Yeah, I'm perfectly fine doing that. Just let me know the parameters, and I'll work within that." And so I just added a bunch of parameters, and I was like, I want it within 10 minutes of a bus stop, and I want something with good views and like all the different things, and presented Airbnb and VRBO and a few other sites, and then gave a spreadsheet, and all of a sudden, like 30 minutes later, like I had 5 different choices to choose from, and it was just a matter of me booking it, all listed in price order from lowest price to highest price, not sacrificing on any particular amenities. So it was great because that's time that I would have spent and frustration I would have had, and being able to, I guess, delegate that out was helpful. Kind of gave me back some time to spend with my wife.
Yeah, that's really powerful. And I'm curious if you had any struggles with like trusting somebody else to do that for you. I mean, you already knew your virtual assistant, so I'm sure you already trusted her with a lot because you know her. But I'm asking because I myself kind of a control freak. I'm just going to admit it. And so trusting other people and delegating to people is really difficult for me. I can do it at work because like at work I know what everybody's job is. I know that they were hired to do this job and I trust them to do this job, etc. But it's like for instance for my podcast, we talked about me getting a virtual assistant in the beginning, and one of the reasons I'm not doing it is just cost. Right now is not, I don't want to spend that money right now. But another part of it is like, are they going to do as good a job as I would do on my own? And I'm just wondering if you came up against any of that. And if you did, if you have any recommendations, or even if you didn't, if you have any recommendations to get around those thoughts.
Yeah, so I would say for me, it kind things started to make more sense given some of the, I guess, the books that I've been reading and some of the other podcasts and things I've been consuming. So one of the first one that comes to mind is Who Not How, which talks about essentially at a high level, my interpretation of it is rather than trying to figure out how to do the thing or what things I need to learn in order to be able to do a specific task or have a certain skill, figure out who can do it, and does the cost of having that person do it for me outweigh the stress and time it'll take for me to learn that thing and be as proficient as a person who already knows the thing. So that, along with another book I'd read called Clockwork by Mike, I think it's Michalowicz or something. He talked a lot about using virtual assistants to kind of get back some of your time. And those two things helped. But then I went down a YouTube rabbit hole, if I'm being honest. And then my security brain kicked in, and so what I ended up doing is putting different guardrails in place so that way my trust isn't necessarily like, oh, I have full trust in you, but at the same time, there are different things I can do to, I guess, reduce my overall risk. So there's a concept called a password manager, which everyone in life should have because we all have passwords, and unfortunately, most of them suck. And if you made it, sucks. I'm sorry. I work in security. As my shirt says, I love strong passwords.
I heart strong passwords. Yeah, nobody can see that, but it's also has like a dollar sign and like a seven for certain letters. I love that.
So yeah, so like password manager essentially is just it's a tool. It's a tool that can store your passwords, and you have a password for it. And its sole purpose is to protect your passwords and then also create strong passwords. So I ended up, because I am aware of password managers and I've used them in different roles. Pause. Yes. So because I was aware of the password manager, I was aware that there was a way to have a password manager that I can control and I can grant my virtual assistant access to it. That way I can still maintain a level of access over those specific passwords without giving them the explicit ability to see those passwords, access the different accounts for the different services that they're using, and have completely unfettered access, which is important to me to maintain that control because in the event that this person that I do not see on a daily basis ever, I guess, gets upset with me or just is feeling, I guess, vindictive or what have you, I don't want to suffer some type of financial or reputational loss because of it. So the password manager was able to was one lever I was able to pull to give them access to things without giving them access, which is helpful. Then there was all, in addition to that, one thing which I'm definitely, I can see both sides, but for me, it was looking at risk. So like there was software that I ended up purchasing that gives the virtual assistant the ability to clock in and clock out. And then it also monitors their computer for basically to ensure that they're working. Because unfortunately, there have been situations where people have been paying someone and that person hasn't been working. I know that happens with some of my coworkers at work, but not me. But
Yeah,
yeah,
if
so I mean,
any of Yao's bosses are listening, that's not Yao. That's not him.
but yeah, I mean, there's different levers I guess you can pull to give yourself to lower your overall risk and to ensure that you're making a good investment. I think the ultimate lever that you can pull is make sure to do good screening. So I did have some screening processes that I followed. I made sure to, and at the time I didn't necessarily understand the purpose of it, but I had this virtual assistant as part of the application process do a disc test just to get their personality and find out different things from that perspective, how that might be helpful. But I'm going through this leadership course and actually am seeing the reason why that information is important. But at the time, it was just like, oh, let me just add this step.
Yeah, great. Thank you for sharing all of that. It definitely makes me feel a little bit better to look into something like that. And hopefully people in the audience feel a little bit better about, if you put parameters in place that, you know, give the virtual assistant some leeway, but also make sure that they are doing what you want them to do. It allows you to have a little bit more trust. So I love that. Thank you. Well, we're coming to the end of our time. And so one last thing I'd like you to leave us with is a life hack, a recommendation, or a learning that you'd like to share with the community.
Ooh, that's a big one. In fact, my biggest life hack is ask more questions. Ask more questions. It's something that I feel like there was a period in my life where I didn't ask a lot of questions because I was afraid of looking stupid or feeling stupid for asking a question. But I feel more foolish for not asking questions than I do for asking questions. If I didn't ask questions to Randy, I don't know if I necessarily would be where I am in terms of having some rental properties that are positively cash flowing. If I didn't ask questions about financial independence, I'm not sure I would have met you or any of the other financial friends that I've made. If I didn't ask questions in relation to, I guess, my job, I might not work in technology. I've gotten farther in life, I believe, by asking questions than I have by not.
I love that. Yeah, I have a sticky note on my desktop that says stay curious. So I'm there with you. And that's more about not just asking questions to gain knowledge, but it's also asking questions to understand people as well. Because a lot of the times we can make assumptions about people's behaviors that
Mhm.
might be incorrect. So instead of making assumptions, staying curious about why somebody might be doing or saying or behaving in a certain way. And so that's kind of why I have that sticky note there is more about around like people and their behaviors, but it still is just being curious is one of the best life hacks ever. So I love that. Thank you for sharing that. How can people reach you if they'd like to know more, like to get to know you, like to learn more about real estate investing?
Yeah. I'm on Instagram, Yao, spelled YAO, dot invests, plural, INVESTS, dot REI.
Nice. Thank you so much. Yeah, I'll definitely link that in the show notes too for people to find you easily. Thank you so much, Yao, for being here. This was so much fun.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for listening to the Everyday 5 podcast. If you're loving the show, here are some things you can do. Number 1, subscribe in your favorite podcast player and share the show with your friends and family. Number 2, please leave a review. I'm always looking for ways to improve the show. Number 3, check out my website, everyday-fi.com, where you can listen to all the episodes and leave comments for myself and the guest. Number 4, if you're interested in sharing your own financial independence story, you can find a submission form at everyday-fi.com/podcast. And finally, number 5, join my Patreon membership for only $5 a month at patreon.com/everyday5podcast. This is a one-woman show, so every little bit counts. See you next time as we continue to go down the path to financial freedom.